Are you excited for this tutorial as much as I am? Alright, good. Let's get into how to create a portrait using oil paints. First, I start with sketching my reference picture onto my canvas, which is a photo of my son. And yes, your girl is using a projector screen, okay? We are working smarter, not harder this time. With many years of freehand and grid methods, I believe using a projector is the best accuracy for portraits. Use whichever works best for you, but I got this RCA home theater projector at Walmart. Next, we're going to hone in by sketching and defining all of the features. Here, I circle in where my highlights will be so that I don't forget where they'll be placed at once I start blocking in the hues. And this is no special artist pencil, it's just a mechanical pencil. Use what you have. Next, you want to use a smear-resistant coating for your canvas, so once you start to paint, you won't lose the guidance of your sketch. If your palette is always dirty like mine, I recommend a putty knife and some Dawn soap. So go ahead and scrub that thing clean, scrape off all that old paint. It works well with oil paints and acrylics. It doesn't scratch the glass. Which you can find this glass palette on Amazon. And if you're scared that your sink will get messed up, don't worry, just use some baking soda and a little bit of vinegar and voila, your sink is clean. For my paints, I'm using Master's Touch oil, and for my solvent, I'm using Gambol, which acts as water if you're used to using acrylics. Here we're using titanium white, ivory black, umber brown, and the 3 fancy primary colors. The canvas that I'm using is a 16 by 20 burlap canvas from Hobby Lobby, textured with a top layer of white gesso. Here I will start with my medium filbert brush, which is great for packing in paint and blocking in color. So I study my reference picture and pay attention to the undertones, which appears to be a lot of red, yellows, and oranges. I like to blend my colors together on the canvas instead of on my palette because it helps give me a better idea of where the placement of hues are going. You want to pay attention to each segment at a time. Think of the face as a puzzle piece. Don't look at it as a whole, but just focus on each feature by applying the shadows and highlights to each segment before moving on to the next. So there's this method called fat over lean with oils, but I do the exact opposite. I do lean over fat, meaning I pack in all the paint that I can with blocking in the colors, and then towards the end of my layers, that's when I start to glaze with the details. Now that I have the large areas covered, I'm switching to a small liner and small filbert brush. This will help me to start applying the lines, small areas, and crevices to the face. Be patient with this process. Oils take longer to dry, so you're not gonna get all the details in one sitting. Mind you, this is just the first layer. So your sole focus should be on where the colors appear on the face. Our faces are not flat, so it shouldn't appear to be just one color of brown. There are multiple tones in your flesh, so don't be afraid to apply the shadows and the highlights where you see fit. With lining, yes, use the solvent as water like you would with acrylics. This would help with a smooth application. But I do a lot of dry brushing in this first layer. I don't want my layer to be diluted with solvent, more so packed with as much color as I can, so once I apply the second layer, it transitions well on top of one another. So I puzzle pieced from the forehead to the eyebrows, to the eyes, the nose, the cheeks, and now I'm working on the mouth. Once that is done, I will save the eyes for last. Once I feel like I have a basis down, I do a lot of jumping back and forth from different features just so that one area can dry and then I can go back to it and paint over it again. As you see, I switch back and forth a lot through the liner and filbert. So with the filbert, I will be packing in and scumbling. And then as far as the liner is for the lines and the crevices and the creases of the face. Okay, so let's get into the scalp. I know my baby's head is looking a little big right now, but the secret to a nice fade is to make sure that you paint the scalp first and then blend the hair into the skin tone. Your scalp doesn't get any sunlight, so that's why it is the lightest near your forehead. So while this layer dries, we're gonna come back towards the end and add some details of the hair follicles. Next, let's get into blending our own color of orange for his shirt. Here, I'm taking a palette knife and mixing in yellow medium as well as alizarin red to make this vibrant orange. I'm jumping back to my medium filbert brush, cleansing it with the solvent, and applying the orange mixture with some burnt umber and some titanium white. The same goes for folds. Think of it as a puzzle piece. Focus on one fold at a time. Now, while this first layer dries, we're going to wait until the next day for the second layer. Here, I'm using my small filbert brush to start adding in the details for the hair and the face. The first layer is dry enough to start adding in detail, but still wet enough to blend perfectly. This is where I start adding a little bit more solvent to my paintbrush so that it can glide gracefully across the canvas. Even with this liner brush, you see me adding in the details of the eyebrow hair. The more layers you add, the more defined and detailed it gets. Even though this is the second layer and it looks like it's coming together perfectly, we still have some ways to go. Let's jump into creating the background color. Here I'm mixing some ultramarine blue and titanium white. I use the small filbert brush to get into the corners of the portrait and the larger filbert brush for the majority of the background. I like to blend more white around the head for this soft halo effect. Towards the corners of the canvas, I'm also blending with white so that it can fade into the gesso. Now I'm jumping back into the portrait so I can start adding some more deeper hues. I've tinted his face with the orange that I've used for his shirt so that it is a light source reflection. I'm also going in to deepen the shadows around his face, which the deep hard lines start to create a great contrast of dimension. Hard lines really help the image to pop. So be sure to capture that and focus on the rounds of the face, the nose, the lips, and so forth. So I'm jumping back to the hairline and starting to define the hair follicles with a stippling effect. As I wrap up this layer, let's jump into day 3. Can we talk about how hard teeth is, okay? Teeth can really scare somebody away from painting, but don't be alarmed. The only time you should use black for teeth is for the shadows so that the teeth can come forth. But when you are creating lines for the indentions of each tooth, only use a light gray with more solvent and less paint. Make sure the base is off-white and the tips of each tooth where the glare hits is pure white. Truly just focus on one tooth at a time. I'm telling you, every feature is a puzzle that requires the attention and detail to each. Reminder, hard lines against the background really make the portrait come to life. All right, so next I'm adding in some geometric shapes to kind of complement my toddler, and of course using the primary colors to fill in the shapes. Oil pastel is a great medium for sketching to add on top of a painting if you want to add more elements. It blends well with paint without leaving residue. I clearly packed my paintbrush too much, so I was trying to figure out how I could get this off without messing up the background color, but that's okay, we bounce back. When it comes to flat yellow paint, always add white to make it more vibrant. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up here and clean my brushes. If you don't have a coil, just clean your brushes on the side, but make sure that you're not mushing it into the solvent because that will damage your brushes. There's really no need to wash these. The solvent does the cleaning itself and they're good as new for the next use. All right, y'all, so this is the last day. I'm just going in and adding another layer to the shapes. But remember when I said lean over fat? I am basically just grazing the canvas lightly with the finalized details. It's a very feather-like approach with scumbling and stippling in those textures of the face. The more you pack your brush with more solvent and less paint, it creates a translucent layer to add those subtle details and textures. This is great to imitate that natural glow and sheen that the skin gives. I hope this quick tutorial encouraged you to go paint your own portrait, and let me know if you would like more videos like this.